financial results?
Yeah.
Profit in a difficult year?
Yeah, it is. And I think that's the secret. I mean, the challenge for rugby is that our revenue is too cyclical. It goes up and down, and what we have to do is try and get greater sustainability. But the good thing about the result this year is we'll make a loss. Or sorry, what we're reporting on, of course, is 2018. In 2019, we'll make a loss, as we always do in a World Cup year, because we play less Test matches. There's only 3 games in Australia. What the profit we've engineered for 2018 allows us to do is actually not have to cut by absorbing the loss we're going to make in 2019. But the ultimate solution is to get revenue that's more sustainable, not always reliant on team performance.
How much of that profit was kind of due to having one less Super Rugby team? Was that kind of the major difference?
Well, there was a component of that, obviously. I mean, the reason that we went through the process of going back to 4 teams, one was to improve the financial health of the organisation and put us in a position where we can actually increase funding. We have increased funding across the board in a number of areas, but also to make the teams more competitive. And in both in 2018 and 2019, the teams have been more competitive. So you're starting to see early uplifts in sort of broadcast numbers and those sort of things, which suggest that if that continues, then you start to get better performance and better revenue flowing from that.
Cameron, it doesn't sound like there was any mutiny on the Super Rugby format or anything at the meeting, but there are obviously some really big concerns from the Super Rugby teams about the proposed format change. How do you feel like that's going to play out?
Oh, well, I mean, none of that is news in the sense that we've been talking to the Super Rugby teams for a long time. Obviously, our teams have worked very hard to build commercial relationships with Japan, both in sponsorship levels and other things, which is great. And we were very supportive of the Sunwolves. But ultimately, if you don't have a situation where the host union is not going to support that team, and there's obviously very increased cost, we're not going to bear that cost. The feedback quite clear is that there is potentially greater opportunities and integrity around a 14-team round robin. So I think the balance is, what they're seeing at the moment, quite legitimately, and we know this because we've been talking to them about it for a long time, is a potential hole as a result of the Sunwolves not being in it, and as yet not a promised uplift in revenue, because we haven't actually closed out some of the commercial opportunities from the 14-team competition. Having said that, what they do know is that ultimately their problem's our problem. That's why there's there's a sense of shared responsibility. There's no scenario where we can be strong if one of our franchises is weak. So they recognise that, and we're committed, and they're very supportive of an ongoing process where we'd have to keep working through, well, how do we now close out those commercial opportunities to plug that hole and hopefully add to it.
The argument for, hopefully a bigger broadcast deal as a result of a better competition, delivering or being able to make up for fewer home games for all the Super Rugby teams, isn't that the sort of same argument that was made in the last deal, that the pie is bigger, it papers over the cracks?
Well, I think, the issue is really at the end of the day, I think what's pretty clear is that the only way really to drive increased revenue is having fan engagement, which leads to sponsor engagement and broadcaster interest. That's about teams being competitive, and also so therefore every contest meaning something, as opposed to games where there's either a predetermined result or limited interest. And I think what we're seeing now is that if you look at this year's format, we are seeing a better improvement in the way fans are reacting to Australian teams being more competitive. That's leading to some, what was pleasing today is, some of the new sponsorship arrangements that are coming through. So, sometimes less can be more, and I think a lot of sports have gone down, and we're open to acknowledging that, the expansion path didn't work for Super Rugby, but also part of that is not actually repeating the mistake and saying, well, how do we get back to a format that's more engaging? So we're pretty confident that the 14-team round robin, which will still include 4 Australian teams, will probably lead to greater commercial opportunities. But it's a shared problem in the sense that the franchise in Australia and Rugby Australia have to work together.
Is there any update on the Nations Championship given at the meeting?
No, not at this stage, no. I mean, that's obviously still working. We're, as I said, we're supportive of it because, again, the same concept, it actually provides, a greater number of games that are meaningful. Meaningful games drive greater fan engagement, which has all the other flow-on benefit. But having said that, I mean, if it doesn't go ahead, we've got other options we're working on with our SANZAR partners to create new versions of Rugby Championship and things going forward in the next broadcast cycle, which hopefully will mirror that concept of creating something that's a bit more meaningful.
Well, without Nations Championship, do you think there's a possibility of uplift in the next deal?
Oh, it's hard to say, but that will come down to the sort of format we design. But I think, as you said, if you design formats where more of the games really have something on the line, and that actually drives the sort of broadcaster interest. That's certainly in other formats beyond the World Nations. That's what we're thinking about. Yeah, sorry, but
yeah, I was just going to say, what kind of changes would you be open to with the Rugby Championship, given you see?
Well, we're pretty flexible. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're trying to. We're happy to look at any of the sort of concepts that would, again, it's really that thing about saying, all test matches must mean something. I mean, they obviously all mean something in the sense of the players wearing the national jersey, but it means something in the sense that it's going to contribute to something, and that's why things like promotion, relegation, and those sort of things, which I know are difficult concepts, but that adds interest into the game. So I think we're open to any sort of formats, and the good thing about Sanzo, it's a pretty mature joint venture now, so we've got a pretty good working relationship around that table to sort of work out what might be interesting formats for the Rugby Championship going forward.
Just talk to you quickly about participation. We were talking before about the numbers. It's a challenge across all sports. Given it's a World Cup year, you're probably anticipating more interest at a grassroots level. But what other things are in place to ensure that keeps heading in the right direction?
Yeah, we've got. I mean, obviously, I said one of the pleasing things was the uplift. I mean, obviously, we're seeing extraordinary uplifts in things like sevens, women's participation, both in sevens and 15s. Our schools program is really moving forward with a lot of participation, particularly now getting into the government schools. So we are taking that. We've got an exciting program, a series of programs to engage in regional parts of the country as well. But there's no question that a World Cup year, particularly if the team does well, does have the opportunity to leverage off that. And because one of the things we have as a sport is that we're a global sport. We're one of the few Australian sports that's on the global stage. So yeah, we would be very much hoping leading into the World Cup that we're actually able to gain a lot of interest. Right up to the farewell test match at the new Parramatta Stadium or Bankwest Stadium on April the 7th against Samoa. Build up that up to their departure, and then hopefully coming back holding the cup and then using that as a leverage into 2020 to really build off participation.